This is Phantom Electric Ghost and with Alan Katz, right? From HBO's iconic Tales from the Crypt. And you're also
Hmm.
a podcaster. And,
Indeed, I am a proud podcaster.
and you have the podcast, which actually won an award. Uh,
Well, we were named the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. Entertainment Weekly called our first season the best film podcast of 2022.
well, that's
And
so much award.
yeah, well, it was to us. It might as well come on a plaque. Uh, in the very first season, I'm now in the fourth season, 160 episodes in. But the very first season, I told the story of the making of the second Tales from the Crypt feature film, Bordello of Blood,
Yeah, I remember that.
which we were not supposed to make. There was a whole other movie we were supposed to make called Dead Easy. There's a whole podcast in it.
Wow, that's cool. Well, I'm a big fan of, like I told you in the chat room, in the green room, of the EC Comics. And they're kind of like EC Comics, for those that don't know, were the comic that caused, like, Wertheimer to go and create the comic book code. They forced the code on the industry, and the beloved EC Comics that had all the horror comics from the 50s were just wiped out.
The
We were left
Gaineses had to go before Congress and really say, "Hey, we're just a comic book company. What
what's the
we're
deal? He's the boogeyman. But a comic book with a boogeyman.
hey, the easiest thing to point at. I don't want to get political, but America has much larger problems than that,
Yeah, the
but by a
seduction of the
lot.
seduction of the innocent.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of the EC Comics too. I loved everything that Bill Gaines created. I loved Mad Magazine when I
Yeah,
was a
man,
kid.
survived it.
And my path to Tales from the Crypt was so strange.
Yeah, how did
Someone
that
should
happen?
make a movie of it.
Yeah, how did it go from like from the comic books to actually being on the HBO and the movies and everything else?
Well, the comic books path went something like this. Um, HBO at first was the movie service, and then they thought, "Hey, let's do some original programming." And at first, the first two shows they did, there was one called First and 10, which was about football. Another called it was Brian Benben's show, Dream On. And basically, those were just single camera shows with can I curse on
Yeah,
your
yeah,
air?
yeah.
Oh,
You're
okay.
cool.
So they were just basically single camera shows with tits and the word fuck. Okay, that's the only thing that distinguished them. That made them okay. I see why this is on HBO. No networks and practices. And then at that time, TV and movies were nowhere near each other. TV was over here, and movies were way the fuck over here. And you did not travel between the two. Oh, the occasional Robin Williams or Tom Hanks would go from TV to feature films. But if you went from feature films back to TV, that meant your career was over, pal. So there was just this void between the two. And then one day, these four mega producers, Hollywood mega producers, Joel Silver, Richard Donner, Robert Zemeckis, and Walter Hill, they approached HBO and they said, "We want to put big feature cinema scope inside your little TV box." And HBO said, "Yes, we love that idea. Whatever the hell you want." And that's basically what they did. There was no development process like there is in a normal TV show. And being is that these were film guys who had no idea how to make a TV show or how to finance a TV show, they didn't get a deficit partner either, which would bite them in the ass. We'll get to that.
But that's
But
amazing.
they didn't they didn't develop the show. They didn't, how are we going to tell these stories? And well, they wanted to create a host, so they had there was the Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair, and I guess they could have done that, but Joel found Kevin Yeager. He bumped into him one day. We tell this story on the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, and Kevin created the puppet Crypt Keeper, which is very different than the old white guy in the comic books. And then Kevin found the voice, found John Kassir. And so you had puppet and voice, but no one ever asked the question, okay, who is he? Who is this character, this Crypt Keeper character? But they were writing scripts already, and whoever was writing the episodes would throw a couple lines at, what's this puppet called? The Crypt Keeper? Okay, here's some lines for him to say. And the first season was 6 episodes. Second season was 18 episodes. 24 episodes. It was just a character, a puppet called the Crypt Keeper. At the end of the second season, because they hadn't been treating it like a TV show, the producers were just spending money. There was no organization to it. And the night before the wrap party, HBO handed the executive producers a financial statement that pointed out that they had been cash flowing everything. They were $1 million in the hole. And hey, guys, there's a commitment to a third season. If you want a third season, give us the $1 million right now, or you in the third season go fuck yourselves. And so they got out their checkbooks, the executive producers, and they wrote a check to HBO for the $1 million, and they canceled the wrap party, and they fired everybody. They fired the producers. And HBO had a very good relationship with my partner at the time, Gil Adler. And Gil is an exceptional producer. He was trained, he came up with his training as an accountant. And so he knows if you have $1 to spend, don't spend $1 you haven't got it. If you can do what you're doing for 99 cents and make it look like $1, even better. Hey, if you can make it look like $1 and change for your 99 cents or 98 cents. And so that was always the value that he brought as a producer, with great creative instincts too. He saved a show called Vietnam War Stories for them, and that went on to win some awards. And so they had another problem production with Tales from the Crypt. They were $1 million in the can. They were now obligated to do this third season. The intention was to close the show out when they hired Gil and me to take over the show. We had other plans. For starters, we reinvigorated the core, the EC core, being a fan. And because now we were going to treat it like a TV show, every script was going to come through me. And so, it would, I was going to be the keeper of the franchise flame where the EC Comics was concerned. And no one had done that previously. So that was one of my jobs. The other job that was mine was to write the Crypt Keeper segments. Well, as no one had developed him, I don't know how to write for a cipher. I don't know how to write dialogue for a character who isn't. And so my question walking in the door, just so I could do my goddamn job, was, all right. At the end of the production day, like we all do, he punches the time clock. He goes home to his crypt. Okay, what does he have for dinner? What does he watch on TV? Does he have any hobbies? Does he likes or dislikes? Who are his friends? And just asking the question, who is he? I began to fill the puppet with a personality. And I grew up a huge Marx Brothers fan. I love Groucho Marx. And so to me, the Crypt Keeper was my own little Groucho Marx. And I had to fill him with a personality, and the closest thing at hand was me. And writers being lazy motherfuckers, I just filled in with me because that was easiest. And so the strange thing is, so the puppet is Kevin's, the voice is all John's, but every thought the Crypt Keeper had, every word he said, that was me.
That was you. You pulled from you. You pulled as a
And it was, I literally wrote every single word the Crypt Keeper said. It had to go through me. Well, no one else was doing it. It was my job. And I got to tell you, in all honesty, writing the Crypt Keeper, I loved doing it in the abstract, but doing it in practical terms was so fucking hard. It was like pulling organs through your nose. Like passing a kidney stone the size of a fucking watermelon.
It sounds like an EC comic.
Oh my, yes, it was. It was really hard, but it was, the Crypt Keeper himself was the 6 puppeteers was the Crypt Keeper. You had 3 people working his animatronic face with, levers, and you had a right arm and a left arm and another who was really the forward and backward motion of his body, so that as they all worked in concert, he it was this, I'll describe the process. So I would write the segments and we would record, 3 or 4 at a time. We would shoot 3 or 4 at a time because it was a very big production. Once the Crypt Keeper had a personality and began to do things and in essence go places, these all became very complicated gags that we had to work with the puppeteers. We had to choreograph in tune with the puppeteers. And so I would record what we called the beep track with John. And then we'd go into studio and the director would yell action and the beep track would play. We call it a beep track because it goes beep, beep, beep. And then John's voice and the puppeteers would go to work. The Crypt Keeper would sit up and he'd sing and he'd dance. He'd do what John whatever he was saying. And then he'd come to the end and the director would yell cut. And the Crypt Keeper would sag back. And you go, oh my God, that's right. He's a puppet, because when he was doing his stuff, yes, every last one of us on this set who we knew goddamn well he was a puppet. You would just forget.
Yeah.
And he would come to life in our own heads. And so the creation of the Crypt Keeper was actually a rather complicated process. It really is 3, and I would include Gil to a degree because Gil directed a lot of the Crypt Keeper segments. And so really how you see the Crypt Keeper is the Crypt Keeper. And so Gil was also rather instrumental in as proof that we had succeeded in reinventing, in creating the Crypt Keeper. The show got extended multiple seasons. And we were able now to get stars to come and do the show and direct the show. And suddenly we became an interesting property again. And it was everyone who has done Tales from the Crypt and who I've talked to about doing Tales from the Crypt on the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. We talk about the making of Bordello of Blood, but what's important about the making of Bordello of Blood is that it was such a contrast, that creative process, if we can call it that, to the process of making Tales from the Crypt, which everyone who made that show, looking back in retrospect, was one of the most rewarding creative career, creative gig any of us ever had, because of the freedom that we had on the show and the remarkable people that we got to work with making Tales.
Like a team. It's like a whole team, because like you said, like the Crypt Keeper is like 3 people.
Everything about it. It was an incredible experience. And well, like I said, before the 3rd season was done, HBO said, oh, well, now that it's being run like a TV show, we see there's a future for this. And they ordered a bunch more seasons, and then Universal ordered 3 feature films. But that was not because of the comic book stories, because we didn't use any of the comic book stories. The thing that became the franchise. A couple of years ago, people have been trying to remake Tales from the Crypt for a while now. M. Night Shyamalan wanted to remake it a couple of years ago. I think he optioned the right to the comic books, because he thought, when he optioned the right to the comic books, well, they came with the Crypt Keeper. No, they don't. Because the EC Comics, that Crypt Keeper is one piece of intellectual property, IP, and the puppet created for the TV show is a separate piece of IP owned by the Crypt partners, Point Man Joel Silver.
So now, different ownership.
Sorry?
Different ownership. It's not what he thought.
Entirely different ownership. And part of the problem is that Joel is Joel is a great movie producer, an impresario in the classical sense, but he's also a difficult personality, shall we say. He is, and I think he'd be happy. I think he'd even admit it, a world-class asshole. He is impossible to work with. He is ridiculous. Movie characters have been created based on Joel. Lots of producer characters. Yes, Joel was what they were thinking about. And in time, a lot of people get to a point they think life is too fucking short to work with Joel, and so they say no. And that is where it is with the Gaines family. This Bill Gaines long gone. But the Gaines family would not work with Joel if their lives depended upon it. And so from that perspective, the Crypt Keeper and Tales from the Crypt are forever divorced.
Wow,
they can never be together ever again. Where will the children go for Christmas? Oh dear.
That's strange how things like that happen, where you have like people would think, don't know the story behind the scenes of the difficulties that happen sometimes with properties and intellectual property.
And it's so personality driven. Now with the feature films, all right, the mandate was to do 3 different feature films. And the first feature films, I think, is a terrific movie called Demon Knight. Terrific. Ernest Dickerson directed. Billy Zane is wonderful. Bill Sadler's the hero. Jada Pinkett's wonderful. Oh God, look at the supporting cast: CC Pounder, Dick Miller. Gosh, Charlie Fleischer. Yikes! Charlie Hayden Church. An amazing cast. We, per the mandate, Gil and I wanted to do this psychological thriller for the second Crypt feature. And we had been developing a script. It was originally called Fat Tuesday. We had evolved it into a thing called Dead Easy. It was a psychological thriller, took place in the swamps around New Orleans. An amazing villain, this Harlequin character. And a year and a half working on this script. Universal, everyone was on board with it. They sent us to New Orleans we spent several months there prepping it. And gosh, we had cast a young unknown named Salma Hayek as the female lead. And we were 3 weeks away from the start of principal photography when suddenly Universal said, stop, come home. They pulled the plug. You're not going to make this Dead Easy anymore. Come home. And we were bewildered when we got back in Los Angeles and they put a script down in front of us. They said, you're going to make this instead, this Bordello of Blood thing. Now, why did this happen? At about this time, a brand new studio called DreamWorks had come into being. And DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving Universal. Now, he didn't leave the lot, but he left Universal. And he began to make talent deals, his company, and Universal was desperately afraid of losing another huge piece of talent to DreamWorks. One of my executive producers, Bob Zemeckis. Spielberg was his mentor. And Universal approached Bob and they said, Bob, we love you here at Universal. What can we do to make you stay? And I don't know anything else about the deal. Obviously, it was good enough that Bob stayed. I know one deal point. They agreed to buy the first student script that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale ever wrote when they were students at USC Film School for $500,000. Thing called Bordello of Blood.
So that's how you got it.
And it was a deal point in a deal. And it was simply I was a way to put some money into Bob C's and Bob Gale's pocket. And no intention was to make a movie. But after making the deal, I guess Universal sat there thinking to themselves, holy cow, we're going to eat $500,000 here. Hey, wait a minute. Bob's about to executive produce this other horror movie, this Dead Easy thing. Well, that script cost us $50,000. Fuck that shit. Toss that. Take it out of their budget. Hey, they're going to make Bordello of Blood instead. It's got Bob Zemeckis' name on it. That's better than my name. And so they said, yeah. So that's why you're going to make Bordello of Blood. And hey, your release date hasn't changed. You still start shooting in 3 weeks. Go. And so we went from really about to make a movie that we were all devoted to making. For Gil and I, I'm not really a horror guy. And Gil's not a horror guy, but that's where, we've made a living in it. It's been wonderful to us. We really thought Dead Easy was going to be our way to show, that the world that we're not one trick ponies. We can do other things too. And I think all of us creatively felt that way. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we were going from that project that was our way out to a fucking student movie called Bordello of Blood.
To go backwards. So it must have been hard to kind of have to go backwards for contractual reasons.
It's very hard to make a movie that your heart isn't in. That never mind that your heart isn't in. You flat out, if you weren't If you didn't feel contractually obligated to make the movie, you would not be fucking doing it. And so literally once you make that decision to start a creative endeavor that you want no part of, do not be shocked when every day is stupider than the day before. And that is exactly what happened. And it was my own personal Waterloo. Really, we were between a rock and a hard place. But virtually every single creative decision on Bordello of Blood was fucking stupid. And when you look at the experience of the collected filmmakers involved, it's mind-boggling. But Universal made the first bad decision, and then it was quite clear that none of the executive producers gave a fuck. All right, we rewrote the movie the best we could, but there was a problem right at the core. The hero of Bordello of Blood, the character that Dennis Miller ended up playing, is a small town detective. Now, ask yourself this question. How much business can a detective do in a small town? Not much. Right. So really, he's a character that doesn't exist except in the minds of film school students who don't know any better because they ain't lived in the world at all. And so there was the hero of the piece. How do you write him? You can't. He's not a practical character.
Caricature. He's just a kind of.
There's no way to build a functional character. Hey, my job was to rewrite the character, was to make it less of a film school student character. Impossible. So it's there's nothing to hang your hat on. We wanted to cast Danny Baldwin, which at least would have given us something gritty. To this day, I couldn't tell you why Dennis Miller. Couldn't tell you. Could not tell you. Dennis didn't want to do the movie. And he said, all right, I'll do it for $1 million, figuring no one in their right mind would pay him $1 million, because no one had paid him $1 million. $1 million to be in a movie, Dennis Miller. But Joel said yes. Now, we didn't have $1 million in our budget. We were a $12 million movie. We had $500,000 in the budget for the lead actor. We went to Universal. We said, can you help us? Can we get some breakage? They said, we don't give a fuck about Dennis Miller. Now, our audience was there for special effects makeup. That's where the money was in our budget, in our $12 million budget. And so to pay for an actor that we didn't want, we took $500,000 off the screen from special effects makeup to give it to an actor who we didn't want and who still didn't want to be there, even though we were paying him $1 million to be there. All right. Erica, I understood why Joel wanted her. We had another actress in mind. Erica, as soon as she was hired, pretty much as soon as she was hired, before she would get on the airplane, decided, even though she just agreed to be in a movie called Bordello of Blood, she didn't want to be that kind of actress anymore. Mm-hmm. And so we started shooting on a Thursday. She was supposed to fly out on a Saturday. We were shooting up in Vancouver. We were supposed to leave Los Angeles on Saturday, be in wardrobe on Sunday to work on Monday. On Saturday, I'm having an argument with her manager about rewriting the script to accommodate the fact that if I don't rewrite the script, she's not getting on an airplane. And so I agreed to rewrite the script. She didn't want to play a former porn star. Well, that was the whole connection to the Dennis Miller character. He was a fan. So if I take that away, what am I going to do? In the end, she agreed that, okay, she had formerly been a large porno star and she had lost a lot of weight. And so that's what made her. I don't know why that was better. I don't. But then having rewritten the script, now, I know Dennis Miller is a professional comedian, and I know that the script I'm handing him, we've tried to make the character funny, but when there's no character to write from, there's no there, and everything is kind of generic. And so I know I'm not handing him great material. And not only that, when he arrived on a Monday morning after we started shooting on that Thursday at location, Dennis, I had to tell him, oh, we changed your character a little bit. Now I've got to tell him, of the strange sexual peccadillos that his character now has. I don't know that he heard a word I said, but when I handed him the revised draft of the script, he opened it up to his first line. He looked at it, he read it, he pointed at it, he said, well, I'm not going to say this. And he closed the script. He said, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to improvise everything. I'll tell you what I'm going to do first in the morning before I do it, but I'm just going to make it all up.
Improv the whole thing.
And he did. And he just refused to do anything that was in the script. And so in rather short order, it was very hard on the script supervisor because, she's scribbling his improvs in the margins. And every take, they're different.
There's no control. It's totally out of control.
Now, imagine you're one of the actors working opposite Dennis. Where does your line start? Where does his line end?
Where's your cue? How do you know what to do?
Now, then there was the fact that Dennis was shooting his HBO show. And they were rehearsing on Thursdays, shooting on Fridays. Well, suddenly we had to flip our week to accommodate Dennis. And so Saturday became our Monday morning. Well, that wasn't the deal our crew made. And it's not like Dennis was lovely to work with. And so very quickly they began to resent Dennis. The cast, well, because Dennis was doing his show, his assistant would come to me first thing every morning, say, Dennis is really tired. Can we shoot him out early and go back to the hotel and rest? And, we did everything we could to accommodate Dennis. So I'd say yes. And so we would shoot Dennis's side of each scene in the morning and he'd improv them. And then lunch, he'd go home to the hotel and we'd shoot the other side of the scene, the other actors, with the script soup reading Dennis's scribbled improvs in the margins of her script so the other actors could act. And so in very short order, they started hating Dennis too, because I don't know, it's kind of disrespectful. So that was our Dennis issue. Angie. We wanted Robin Givens. And someone had said, Robin's not an easy personality. We said, we work for Joel Silver. Don't you want an easy personality? Is nothing to us. So I don't know how difficult she would have been. I don't care. I think Robin Givens would have given us an incredible performance. But at the same time that we were making Bordello of Blood in Vancouver, for reasons we had no business making it Vancouver, but that's a whole other stupid thing that we did. Joel was executive producing another feature film across the border in Seattle, Assassins, Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone. Mm-hmm. And Stallone at the time was engaged to Angie Everhart.
Oh, yeah.
And one day, Stallone approaches Joel on the set of Assassins and says, hey, Joel, are you going to make a movie in Vancouver? Put my girlfriend Angie in the movie. That way you can visit her across the border. And rather than being a responsible producer who would say, that's a great idea, Sly, but let me talk to the guys. Let me see how that works out. Instead, he went, that's a great idea, Sly. We'll do it. And we begged him not to. The villain in a horror movie is kind of like the most important character in the whole piece. Just looking back, as an example, the first Tales from the Crypt movie, a feature film, Billy Zane, a wonderful villain. It's how you cast the villain is really important. If you cast Paul, if you cast like Paul Rubens as Freddy Krueger, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. It's bad casting. And so not only was it not good casting simply because it wasn't a fair thing to ask Angie to do because she didn't have the chops. It's not a fair ask on our part either. And the motivation was not because Angie was an accomplished actress who gave a great read. We screen tested her really so that our hope was that Stallone would look at the woman he loved and not want to do this to her.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out that Stallone had an ulterior motive. And while the first couple of weekends, she would go visit Stallone on the weekends, and because Dennis was improvising his dialogue, Angie would come back from Seattle with all her dialogue rewritten by Stallone and directed by Stallone. And we would have to disabuse her that no, you're not improvising your dialogue. You're going from the script, and Gil is your director. There was communication between their set in Seattle and our set in Vancouver. They, after a couple of weekends, asked us to hold Angie for the weekend and not let her come down. And we said, what we're going to have her do? What? She's got homework? We said, no, we're not doing that for you. We began to hear stories from the set of Assassins. Now, there's a very famous story, and we tell this story in the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. There's a story about Stallone. He has never denied that it's true. The only question has ever been, on what set did it take place? And I'm saying it took place on the Assassin set because I did not hear the story before. I worked on Bordello of Blood, and I heard it from my production staff, who heard it from the production staff in Seattle. And so apparently one day Stallone finishes a scene, goes back to his trailer, unaware of the fact that his wireless lavalier mic is still broadcasting back to the sound card. There's someone waiting for him in his trailer. And the young woman who's there proceeds to fillet him. Well, Sly's very particular about how he likes his dick sucked, apparently. And there's a crowd gathering around the sound cart, and they're all hearing him go, yeah, that's right, cup the balls, stroke the shaft. Yeah, stroke the shaft, cup the balls. The next day, Stallone shows up on set, and the whole crew are wearing T-shirts that say, stroke the shaft, cup the balls.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh.
He has never denied this story. Like I said, the only question is what set. I'm telling you Assassins because that's where I heard it from. From my set, my crew heard it from their crew. 2/3 of the way through my production, he broke up with her in the middle of a workday. And it was painful. It was painful because a lot of us knew what was happening and we couldn't say anything to her. And so that also sucked. Angie's a lovely person. I mean, really, she worked her ass off to try to get the part right. And I think she gave the best performance she possibly could. But I don't think it was a fair ask at the jump. Like everything we did on Bordello of Blood, we didn't do it for a filmmaking reason. We did it for a completely different reason. In the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, I take you down to a granular level. There were things that happened that were just mind-blowing. There's the time that Joel, the first time he came to visit our set from Assassins, he flew across the border in a private plane without a single piece of ID on him. Not a driver's license, not a passport. And mid-flight, he called our set. He called Gil, and he told Gil, I'm coming to visit you. Oh, by the way, I didn't bring any ID with me. And Gil said, well, they're not going to let you into the country. And Gil's in the middle of setting up a shot. And Joel says, well, they better let me in the country or I'm going to pull this movie and they all go fuck themselves. And Joel says, they don't care, Joel. Canadian Customs doesn't care. And Joel's going, well, they better care. You better call Canada and tell them I'm coming. Literally, that is what he said. Call Canada and tell them I'm coming. Well, when he arrived in Canada without a passport, of course, they didn't give a fuck. And they held him for several hours. And it was only because our production manager, Colleen Neistat, had a relationship with the people there in the customs office that they'd heard that there was a connection, and they called Colleen and they said, does this madman have anything to do with you? And she said, yes. I will vouch for him. Can I come and get him? And it's only because our production manager vouched for him that they let him into Canada.
Wow.
And boy, did they make Canada regret it.
More stories.
That is just a taste of what it was like working on Bordello of Blood, my own personal Waterloo. Telling the story of Bordello was a revelation. I suddenly discovered after the second season, it just began. It's become an exploration of. It's a nuts and bolts inside baseball view of the filmmaking craft and what happens when our craft turns to crap. So it's everyone that I've ever worked with in the world just having that kind of conversation. But I discovered I love the storytelling part of it, especially. I discovered the thing that I wanted to be when I grew up as a podcaster. And a friend from school contacted me. He had something that happened to him that he thought would make a great movie or TV series. And when he told me what it was, I said, no. First of all, the TV series, the TV and film business are both fucked up under normal circumstances. These days, they're even more fucked up. It is no. And when I said, when I tell you what the story is, I said, no, you got to do this as a podcast because you'll actually be able to tell the story. It's called The Donor, a DNA Horror Story. In the mid-1980s, my friend Hal, let's call him, worked his way through medical school as an anonymous sperm donor. Jump forward 27 years. He's a successful radiologist. He joins 23andMe, curious about his health genes. Never occurs to him the larger ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA database. That's what 23andMe is. And he lost his donor anonymity, and suddenly 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea that their actual biological father was Hal, a sperm donor. They were bumping, these were 27, 28-year-old, 27, 26-year-old people bumping into the fact that they didn't know who half of them was. The 7th was one of the daughters. Hal had been married for 20 years to a woman who came to the marriage with a child from a previous marriage, and Hal raised this as his son. He never raised a biological child as his own. And when he suddenly discovered he had these 7 biological children, well, he wasn't going to get to raise them. He was very excited by the idea of getting to have as much of a familial relationship as they wanted to have. He was, he had money. And so he was quite willing to help them, to benefit them, to treat them as much like father and child or just friends with a genetic connection as they wanted. And so he was very excited by it. The 7th, one of the daughters had known for a year that she was donor conceived, and she'd been looking for Hal. And she brought something to the table, a thing called genetic sexual attraction. And that's when things got weird. And hey, Tales from the Crypt. I like weird stories. This was an absolutely true story. I had never heard anything remotely like this in my entire life. And I thought, I got to tell this. And so The Donor, a DNA Horror Story is a 7-episode series at thedonorpodcast.com. I can promise you've never heard a story like this. It is, there's definitely a monster. It is a horror story in many, many different ways. While I was doing the research, on the donor conceived world, and there's a whole world of people out there who all of Hal's donor conceived kids, these are all half siblings with each other. They called each other diblings, donor conceived siblings. And as much as Hal wanted to form a bond, the diblings all form a really strong bond because they're brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And the problem was when things got weird with the 7th, with the daughter, it got weird all over the place. But it was understanding the relationships that this whole dibling world, doing research into that, I met a woman named Donna Hall who gave me some great background. And when Donna told me her personal story, I thought, oh my God, this is a fucking podcast unto itself. Donna grew up in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia in the 80s and 90s. Her family wasn't the Corleones from The Godfather, but they made national headlines all the same. Donna's mom maybe the worst mom ever. Phyllis was in the headlines, in newspaper headlines, was called the Home Alone mom of Bucks County. She spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Donna's stepdad, John Hall, was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars on bullshit confessions that he created to get himself out of all the various legal jeopardies that he was in. Among the people that he put behind bars, his own stepson, Herb, for a year and a half on a murder charge he didn't commit. That was just for retribution for something else that Herb did. John also put a guy named Walter Ogrod on death row for 24 years for a murder Walter did not have anything to do with. And Donna, I'm biased because I'm working with her, but I think she is a rock star storyteller. She brings, well, first of all, she's a great storyteller, not an ounce of self-pity, a wonderful sense of humor. And for her, this isn't just a story about the true crime family in which she grew up. It's a story about her search for safety, but more importantly, empowerment. And so really, it's a true crime story that's also a terrific empowerment story. It's called The Hall Closet. And like I said, I discovered myself in the business I really want to be in, telling stories.
Yeah, as a different type of writer. Yeah, but you found that the podcasting allowed you to dive into the writing, so you weren't phoning it in, getting involved in something that you weren't passionate about.
Gosh, yeah. And suddenly I've got, at this point, I've got now 9 different podcasts in various stages. I've got the ones that are already out, the ones that I've mentioned to you, but I've got now 6 more in various stages of production and pre-production.
So you like to take a focus and create a podcast that's going to have a definite beginning and end and actually tell a story?
I like both. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is every week.
That one's still going on, but
yeah, that still goes on. But there are a lot of stories. I think it's
self-contained stories.
It's self-contained. It's bite-sized, and you want to just hear a podcast on a trip. You're going to go in the car for a couple hours. Perfect. It's like having a book to read.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these are self-contained stories, but they will welcome second seasons, and those second seasons could be weeklies. What I love about podcasting is it's the wild, wild west. We are all inventing it in real time as we go along. I love that. Hey, here's another thing I love about podcasting. To take a story idea from my head to, if I want to make a TV show or a movie, even under the best of circumstances, it's arduous, it's hard, and failure is the most likely outcome. But now more than ever, there are thousands of assholes standing in your way, in the way of taking that idea from here to there. To do a podcast, there's only one asshole in my way, and it's me.
Yeah, you're like a creator-owned property, and you're the writer, you're the producer.
Yeah. Hey,
you're everything, right? So you take the direction, you have your vision, and nobody's coming in an asshole telling you like you can't do it.
Absolutely. Hey, we got to go find our audience, or we're going to help the audience find us. But okay, I will take that challenge. I will. I like the idea that, hey, I told the story, and it's out there. The way my business, my little company, Costard and Touchstone, and the way that we're creating, the way that we're developing podcasts, and the way that we're producing them, I've got a lot of projects that are on my development board that I wanted to do as TV shows, as TV series, but it's so fucking arduous. I thought, no, I'm going to do them as a podcast first. Half of what happens when you go to try to sell a TV show is you're going into an executive suite, either really or virtually these days, and you're singing and dancing, putting on a whole dog and pony show to try to get the IP that's in your head into their head. How do I convey this idea, the IP, from me to you, so you get it?
Do you have to dumb it down most of the time? Do you end up not being
Oh,
able to
fuck.
really?
Well, yes, but simply in order to sell it, you kind of, it's not a bad exercise because really, if you don't know, if you can't bring it down to a couple of words, what is the story really about? Really? Then you don't know yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true with a lot of projects. The creatives that haven't really been disciplined enough to know, to put it into a handful of words. But if you can, then you fully understand the story that you're telling. It's I just lost my train. What question was I answering
Oh,
there?
yeah, I think I was just asking, they had to dumb it down to kind of get it into these guys, the IP into their.
Well, but yes, and that's painful, but for one's own purposes, it's useful. All right. With a podcast, it's all right there in the podcast, the IP.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that my company is set up and the way that we're approaching our business is, yeah, I want people listening to think, hey, that'd make a great movie or TV show. I want people who make movies and TV shows to think, that'd make a great movie or TV show. And so rather than me going cap in hand, hi, would you like to buy my movie or
Oh,
TV
people
show?
come to you. People will actually come to you for your property.
Well, that is what hey, look, it's all execution driven. The content has to be worthy of people thinking that, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That also is a challenge I'm willing to rise to. Hey, my selection of material and the way that I tell stories. Yeah, if my intention is that I want people to think that way, then I better produce them that way. So, will I succeed or fail? Well, of course that will be seen, but yeah, that's part of my design. I see all these projects in one way or another as a
Well, it's
movie
true.
or TV show or multiple movies or TV shows. And at the very least, from my perspective, whether I make a dime at it or not, I got to tell the story.
Well, it's true creative freedom. It's like why a lot of like independent musicians, right, don't want to be constrained by the label machine, right? They don't want to go through the A&R. They rather own it and do it themselves. Yeah, because like they've
We
got the vision and they know where they want to go, and it's like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a fan base that actually wants it, that feels it.
exactly so. A lot of what's happened, what Napster came for us all.
Yeah, that's true.
What Napster really did is first of all, it broke the music business because before Napster, if I wanted to get new music, I had to go to the record store and pay the exorbitant prices for a tape, a CD, or whatever, and then they'd get me to buy it again when they changed, when the
Remastered.
medium changed.
Yeah, remastered it on CD.
Yeah. Right. So these fucking bastards, had us all by the short and curlies, and so Napster changed that because hey, I didn't have to go through a music store. I went to my friend and they shared their music files with me.
Yep.
And whereas, all right, previously artists would they would tour to support their album sales because the recorded music was where the money was. Napster broke that completely, broke it. And suddenly the recorded music was worth, for most artists, virtually nothing.
Yeah, like
Virtually nothing.
0.004 of a penny.
Yeah. And so now they have to give the music away in order to induce people to come watch them perform live. Touring and merch are where, for most people, that's where the money is.
Yeah, so the shirt.
There's not as
more
much money
for
as
the
the
shirt.
yeah. And it's not money the way it used to be in the old days for most acts. No, it's much harder out there because it's all about, you got to go do the work and perform live. It's not a passive royalty from a record sale. Well, all right. That really eventually happened to everybody. Hey, what's Uber and Lyft? Ask a cab driver.
Yeah, why'd they pay for the medallion? Like, why would you pay for a medallion? Because you don't get it back.
It's getting a ride peer to peer. I contact the driver directly. At the end of the day, YouTube, it was really the Napster effect on television and features to some degree, because really anyone can make product for YouTube, and everybody does. And my kids, I'm, I'm in my 60s, but I had kids late, so my kids are in their 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and my kids, they don't watch TV the way that I watch TV. They don't
You mentioned
consume
watch TikTok.
product. Yeah.
I just on
YouTube.
TikTok all day.
Yeah, YouTube. And so it's a completely different. It's just
Totally
completely.
different system. Like with my daughter, she's an artist, but like she deals with all these other artists in these kind of communities, and they're all dealing with all this underground stuff. They're on these like chats, and they're in these private groups, and they're on Discord, and they're talking this, and there's like this underground of stuff they look at. They look at webtoons, they look at web comics, they look at all this stuff, and it's not coming from the mainstream stuff. The stuff they like is like the underground comics that used to come out of San Francisco, like Robert
Yeah,
Crumb type
yeah.
stuff, you know.
And because we can all market ourselves, we can all Shopify our products. We can, hey, creating a podcast, all right, whatever it costs to if you publish, or if you just go through a hosting app,
Yeah.
that's it. And hey, whatever it costs to promote yourself, that's pretty much it. It's an incredibly democratic medium.
Yeah, you can throw it at the wall, and you actually get to throw it at the wall. There is a wall to throw at.
And so it's, as a creative these days, man, this is to me the most exciting creative environment of all.
Yeah, I was on with this guy who invented like a trumpet called a mutant trumpet, and he's talking about the democratization of music, and that the gatekeeping is gone, right? So that you can just throw it at the wall, and you can get out there. And you don't even have to have the skill set of a Miles Davis or a Sun Ra or a Hendrix. That you can have a skill set as a producer, as somebody as a DJ, as somebody who can move clips around and organize it in a different way, and not actually be as proficient as a Coltrane, but come up with new ideas. And so it's a different level of uh, just the way people look at art. They say, is it art because I put it out there, or is it art because I have this degree from Berkeley?
It is, yes, indeed. It's, and if you can get yourself an audience for your art, you're an artist. It's, who is to say?
Yeah, they can't tell you.
Oh, I've lost my sound.
You lost your headset? I still hear you though. You got it back?
Oh gosh, for some reason I can no longer hear you.
You can't hear me? Oh, that's too bad. Did you lose your headset? Is it like Bluetooth? Did
It
you go
might
on
be
the?
me. Hold on, it might be me. It might be me. I apologize.
Yeah, it's fine. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
It was me. I ran out of juice.
Yeah, it's those Bluetooth will kill you every time. Sometimes the Bluetooth run out of juice. You can hear me now, though?
There we go. Now I'm back. I apologize. My cans ran out of juice. We've been talking so long.
Yeah. Well, the Bluetooth do that to you. If people forget about it, but yeah, it's just I think it's very democratic. It's very open market. You can just throw things out on the wall. It's the law of attraction. People can just find a tribe that vibes with them, right? You just throw it out there and you find it.
And I think, with what is happening politically, people will be looking for their tribes more and more and more out here in the hinterlands, away from all kinds of legacy media. I think legacy media is dead. After the last election, when all the legacy media suddenly kowtowed to the man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big problem because I think a lot of people are just tired of it. Like I talk to like a lot of my daughter's friends, and they get everything from non-standard sources. Everything's coming from like a lot of underground stuff, a lot of like just like it's not where I got things from, and I'm like, wow. And I just like I've learned from my I got 25 something, my daughter, and then she's like showing me all the stuff with her friends. I'm like, wow, you guys live in a different world than I did.
I, yeah, I do you wish you were growing up in this world?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a child of the '70s. I miss the attention span that we had. That like the fact that I could go in the basement and listen to Pink Floyd all the way through. The fact there was maybe only 4 TV stations to look at. The fact that I would read Moby Dick all the way through, right? And not
Did
be
you really?
distracted.
You're good.
I did because I actually liked it, but I was just into art. I was into like looking at Orson Welles and the Third Man, and looking at everything he did, and it's like wow, how can he do that?
Do you
And then
remember the first movie? Do you remember the first movie? I'm going to take it that you are a movie buff.
I like TCM and the term, classic
Oh,
movies and
oh, oh,
watching like
okay. Yes, yes,
all the
yes.
old ones.
Yeah. I mean, TCM is, yes, that is a temple. Do you remember the first movie you ever? Well, can you remember your first movie that you ever saw in a
Ever
movie
really
theater?
in a theater?
Yeah.
It might have been freaking Sound of Music.
Huh, 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 huh.
Something like that, because my parents probably took me to a Disney movie. I think I was being brought to Disney movies, and I remember that one a lot. And then, I think I remember The Wizard of Oz a lot.
Watching that on TV though.
Yeah, that one on TV, but the other one, The Sound of Music, I actually saw it. That was in the theater.
And it's stuck in your head.
Stuck in my head just because I think I was it just clicked. It's like wow. It's like why'd they bring me to this? Because I thought I wanted to see something else, but I didn't really have a say.
How old were you at the time?
I don't know because like I know it's in the '70s. I remember it's like sometime in the '70s, like in the early '70s.
So
I'm pretty
you're a
sure.
5 to 7.
Yeah, around that time. And I was like born in '67, so it's like sometime mid '70s. But it's not what I wanted to see. I was kind of forced to see it.
Yeah, I remember. It's funny. I remember memory of on the night that the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
Oh,
I wasn't interested, so I went and I watched Zorro on the Disney on the Wonderful World of Disney in the basement.
Zorro. I remember that show. I used to, yeah.
That was the Wonderful World of Disney's counter programming to the Beatles was Zorro.
Zorro.
But my interests were slightly different from everyone else's.
I just remember watching like Rod Serling Night Gallery and like sneaking with my older brother who's like 7 years older than me. And I was told I'm not supposed to watch that. And then I watched it anyway.
That's how most people were with Tales from the Crypt. It was the show that they watched despite their parents telling them, no, you cannot watch that. Or for a lot of people, surprisingly, they watched it with their parents. It was their parents. Something about the Crypt Keeper made Tales from the Crypt okay.
That's interesting. Because they think that you would get banned from that. But because DC, had that whole taboo thing.
Oh,
This is
yeah,
like
yeah,
taboo.
yeah.
You're cutting people's heads off, on the cover. These crazy
Kids
covers
love
of
that
people.
stuff. Come on. But we do, in fact, when I do live events, and like I love doing live events, people come up all the time, and what they say is that their memory of Crypt is so fond because it was their first taste of horror.
Yeah, it's like a real classic type of horror. I mean, I remember like watching like Boris Karloff Thriller, and I really dug it, and it was hard to find. I would always be trying to find it because it's not something that's always on.
Yeah,
You had to like look for it, and I just was just drawn to like Boris Karloff the way he did it, right? And I know that that you were out there with other shows, but that one kind of appealed to me because it was kind of like, oh, this is a hard one to find.
Did you ever see Boris Karloff in a film called Black Sabbath?
Oh, I seen that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really frightening in that one.
Yeah, I love a black and white does it for me. When you get the color horror movies, I don't actually, dig the colors. I mean, I had John Carpenter stuff, was cool. Like the music, and I'm in the synths, and I love what Carpenter was doing with his synth stuff. But
Yeah.
I like his soundtracks really appealed to me, and his style was different, and it wasn't like it was. It's like this is a little different to what other guys are doing. So I was kind of drawn to that because it was going in the '70s. There's a lot of those John Carpenter movies happening.
But he became incredibly influential.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of working with Toby Hooper on a couple of occasions, and Toby was lovely. He epitomized the ironic contrast of how most horror people are versus what they, the content that they create. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is horrific.
That's a crazy one. Yeah, that one that one scared me because some of them like they don't scare me, but that one scares me.
There's just a mad brutality to it, but there's also real filmmaking craft. That's what makes it so effective. Toby was just a really great shooter. There's some wonderful shots in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but Toby himself was just this lovely, somewhat befuddled guy. Just sweetest man. But then again, that's been my experience with the entire horror community. It's one of the reasons I love doing horror conventions. They seem to sublimate all their negativity, period, into their horror,
into the art.
Yeah. When you go there, an awful lot of people are dressed up, a lot of cosplay happening, a lot of Freddy, a lot of Jason, a lot of Leatherface. First horror con I went to, I was blown away by this incredibly detailed, which couldn't have been any more than 5 years old, with a perfect Leatherface costume, right down to the appropriately sized chainsaw.
Yeah.
Hilarious. But the reason that people introduce their kids to horror and why they're so into it really, they walk around, they're the sweetest, loveliest people. It really seems to me that they've sublimated all that negativity into the horror. And so, yeah, it's like they've checked it all at the door.
It was like it's escapism. It's like fantasy. I'm a sci-fi buff. Harlan Ellison, Ray Bradbury, all that stuff. Ben Bova. I love sci-fi. Rod Serling, Outer Limits, all that stuff. But Gene Roddenberry. But the horror stuff it's a different space. And I have noticed the sci-fi kids, the Trekkies, versus like the horror crowd. It's a different vibe.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yes. Not unrelated, but slightly a slightly different kind of nerd personality.
Yeah, it's a different type of nerd.
but a lovely, but also, there's a lot of self invested in this world.
Yeah, when you get drawn into it, I mean, like the Tolkien kids, they figured they were into the Hobbit before it was into a movie. Like I was a Tolkien kid. I was into that Dungeons and Dragons and Tolkien and all that.
Oh, you play? I played that
too.
Yeah.
You're just drawn into that world,
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons was incredible fun to play. It was a game of your imagination. You and a bunch of people were walking through, a world that really, the cool thing was it existed in your collective minds.
Yeah, it's this idea like the toys today, kind of give you the world to live in. And when I was a kid, I was like erector sets, Legos.
Build the world.
You build the world and you dream it. And you get in the Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, hey, I can keep on expanding on that. So I kid growing up with erector sets and Legos, I was more into that than instead of being given a Final Fantasy VII, being drawn into somebody's already pre-designed world. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I like the old stuff, the other way of doing it.
Well, it's like on Crypt, all of our effects were practical. We did not have the luxury of digitized anything.
CGI, all that, yeah.
No such thing existed. We might do the occasional matte shot, clever use of mats here and there to create like the feeling like we were in a train station, or in one case, a southern mansion in the middle of a swamp. We shot that entirely on the stage. We were nowhere near a swamp, but using a little bit of old-fashioned, old-school artifice. Yeah, but
with the ingenuity limitations, like as a synthesis, like if I'm using a Moog, mini Moog, versus using like a modern digital sampler synth, I'm limited. It's monophonic. If I want to get to a chord, I might have to overlay it 3 times to overdub it. Right? I'm limited, so I have to make different choices, and the limitations can actually help your art. When you have too many things that you can do, then it's where's your direction? Right? Like I think you can focus on direction when you have some constraints.
I would compare it to writing in iambic pentameter.
Mhm.
There's a challenge, but okay. Now you got to be super disciplined about everything, about the words and the rhythms and everything. And if you can produce something in that, it could be crap, but it could also be quite remarkable. But creative challenges, yeah, they will create actual art as opposed to just throwing shit at the wall because I got a deadline.
Yeah. Well, if you're passionate about it, like if you've got, like you don't have all the tools that somebody else has, you're like a low budget movie, right? You have limited like indie film. Like you can still create a really big impact. You don't have to blow up everything and have all these special effects and all the CGI and all the AI and all this. Like you can still tell a story.
I think of I think of a film maybe like a filmmaker like Danny Boyle when he made what was the one he did? I just went up on the title of the movie. The one before Train Spotting. Well, actually, in Train Spotting too. Actually, Train Spotting is great. Great. They had no money to make that movie.
Yeah, you don't have to have all these crazy budgets. Like everybody said you can't do it unless you got these $200 million budget, 300 million. Like, what do you? It's like, is this all this superhero stuff? I understand that mindset is, but it's like I like a good, film noir, kind of detective movie, that give gritty, or like like a Seven or something. It's like you don't have to have all the effects to actually tell a story. You can actually do it with the actors the old school way, like Orson Welles in Touch of Evil, looking at his face, looking at the shadows and the way Orson would deliver that scene. You don't. It's just you need Orson Welles, but you don't need to have all that money.
No, when I think of my favorite movies, Don't Look Now. That's just that's just great storytelling.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's really it's there's nothing in it. It's 3-4 people in Venice running around Venice and
all the artifice, all the crap. You just get to the bones of it.
And the climax of Don't Look Now. I don't want to give it away to anyone who hasn't seen it. It is staggering. It just blows you away. And
good writing, good acting, good direction.
And then there's one more little twist at the end that's like, oh, that's real. Okay, now I'm really freaked out. It's really, really simple. Gosh, I think of my favorite, like Network is one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's being referred to a lot lately.
Hattie Chayefsky saw everything coming. God, how did he do that? That's a brilliant.
I'm like, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore.
If you look at he saw Fox coming. That was really
what's the ratings in Detroit? What's the ratings in Chicago?
That UBS, That was Fox. That at the
Yeah,
end they're making deals with terrorists to make TV shows, and the
yeah.
terrorists are saying, "No, I want more. Don't be trampling on my rights over here." Brilliant, brilliant writing to
Well, that's
foresee
just, I
that.
love the '70s. You get these movies that people today are like, "Oh, that goes too slow." Like our attention spans are so
Oh,
crazy, right? We
well,
can't sit and
yeah.
digest a real story because it moves too slow and there's no explosion. You know?
There was a terrific movie that my wife and I watched the other night. A little Japanese movie that was so deliberately slow. But a guy from a wealthy family, and he cleans toilets. And you spend a couple days with him, and you just get into the monotony of his life. But what seems monotonous to us is okay, works for him. And
Mhm.
towards the very end of the movie, his sister comes to visit him, and a niece, I think a niece visits him, and she comes to understand what he's like, and then the sister comes to pick up the niece, and it's the story it's telling is so small and subtle. It really has to do with the sister. Just really, none of his family see him, and it doesn't matter to him. When the sister drives away at the end, having no respect for this man and this humble, simple little life he leads. It is
Sometimes it's a story like that. It's very impactful, but if people don't have the patience for it.
You can't tell that story any other way than really by long, slow periods to get
Yeah,
a sense of the rhythm. That Yeah, that's very demanding
it's
of
hard
an
to get it.
audience.
Yeah, what kind of audience is gonna have the patience for that,
But the
'cause
but all right, the cool thing is, all right, because a thing like Netflix exists, a
then maybe
movie
you
like that can exist and find its audience.
yeah, it finds the tribe. 'Cause I watch a lot of K-drama. I watch a lot of Japanese films. I was watching something this K-drama, The Frog, that was really crazy. You're trying to figure out, like, how did this person kill this kid? And you don't really know. Like, there's blood, there's this something happened, but, like, you don't really know till, like, the end. You gotta go through the whole thing to get to it. It's not obvious, like, what happened. And it's like, do people have the patience to go through, like, a really long, drawn out story that's not clear and there's, Easter eggs here and there, but you, like, send you in different trails, and it's like, I like that. I don't know, maybe there are people would like to find this stuff on Netflix. They find it on these social services, the streaming services, and now these stories can be told, like the podcast method. The fact that you get this out there, now you can do the donor podcast, you can do how to not make a movie podcast, you can do all these other sub podcasts because and nobody's telling you like, well, you're flooding the market. You can't produce, so you do
And
what you want.
and who's saying that anyway? The screenwriter William Goldman, who wrote one of my other very, very favorite movies, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid,
That's awesome.
in his book Adventures in the Screen Trade, he makes the statement, and it's absolutely true: nobody knows anything. It is it's true in the film business. It's true in a lot of businesses. It's true in government. It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true all over the fucking place.
Yeah, you just got to me, it's like you gotta let things be, like let it be. Like people always like want to not let things happen. They want to get outraged. Like when Dylan went electric, you're Judas. Like, outrage. Like all the folkies, the folky outrage at Dylan going electric. It's like, yeah, it's like, and he said, like, like, yeah, I think his response was, I don't believe you. But he told him, it's like, you're a Judas. It's like, I don't believe you. It's like on the record. And like, yeah, and he kept on going. He kept on blasting out. It's very punk for Dylan. He had like a punk aesthetic as a young man. And 66, he's like, I'm just doing it. I'm just doing it. And and they were like, yeah, go ahead and do it.
The last laugh is a very good laugh.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, what we've been talking about, we kind of went over, but you kind of needed it, and I don't really care. But
The
yeah,
rules, fuck the rules.
there's no rule. But I want to do appreciate the time you took to be here today. It's
Pleasure was
really just
mine. Really and truly, really and truly.
I love you telling your story because like you have a lot of stories to tell as a writer. You're loving it to be able to tell your stories. And I think that's the greatest thing to see the passion you have
Oh, thank
for
you.
your craft and the ability for you to get your craft out to the public. And I think that's awesome. And I love to push that kind of narrative with this show. And I'm glad that you were able to get out here today and talk about what you're doing now.
I'll tell one last quick story. I came to, I would say I came to storytelling late. I would say for most of my career, I was an awfully good writer, very good writer. Uh, but I was keeping a secret from myself for 45 years about something that happened to me when I was 14. I knew it happened and I denied that it happened, but secrets will gnaw at you. And this one gnawed at me. Well, hey, if you can't tell your own story, you really can't tell anyone else's story. And that had not occurred to me yet, but I was a good enough writer to get by. I went through a 2-decade long writer's block and a deepening depression. I got very, very lucky. I bounced. But when I got lucky and I bounced, I was able to address the secret that I was keeping from myself. And once I could tell my own story to myself fully and then tell the world what had happened to me. Once I could tell my story fully, well, then I could tell other people's stories. And that became suddenly my passion.
Your breakthrough. Well, you broke through that wall. Yeah, like
Indeed.
everybody has that
And
ceiling they have.
and I honestly believe I went from being a very good writer to being a storyteller. How good am I as a storyteller? Well, that posterity will probably be the larger critic, but that became my mission in life. My little company, Costard and Touchstone Productions, that produces all of my podcasts that I'm doing, our mission is to make the world a better place through storytelling. And I happen to think that podcasting is the best venue for storytelling. So yeah, I'm a person on a mission.
I think that's a mission I totally believe in. We've been out here doing this since 2016, and
You are doing exactly the same thing, my friend. You are making the world a better place through your storytelling. That's a simple fact of life, and for that, thank you.
well, I'm glad that I give a platform for folks like you to be out here. I mean, I've seen your work over the years, and I love where you are,
Oh, thank you.
and I'm very appreciative that it took the time today to be on the Family Like the Ghost podcast. And I do appreciate the time you took and the passion you have for your craft. And I want everybody to click on the links that we've been putting up for the
Yes,
the
please,
donor
please click on
podcast.
all those. Please click on all those links.
Yeah, and how to not pay
Hey,
for movie
it'll
podcast.
be worth your while. You'll hear some stories that'll blow your mind.
Yeah, we'll put out some wider links in the full publication. Like when we put this out on Apple and everything, we'll grab a bunch of other links for you and put your main links out there so everybody
Cool.
can get to you.
It is always hugely appreciated, but really more than anything, it's just the time to have a conversation with another talented person. Really, that to me is this journey, and especially that I've just started appearing on other podcasts. It is just me. First of all, the podcasting world is so filled with dynamic, incredible people. It just fills me with such joy to know that I'm part of this community of incredible people. I love that.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's so worldwide. I mean, I get to talk to people from everywhere. You know,
yeah, man,
Yeah.
this is everything about that is just it makes my life better. Just getting to experience all these other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think it improves your craft as a writer. The more people you run into. Uh,
So I'm having been terribly depressed. I know what that's like. I walk around I would say in a perpetual state of bliss. That sounds a little wacky, but it's not the mood stabilizer. That just keeps the darkness in a box. I have a great therapist. She helps with perspective. And I will admit to consuming vast quantities of THC from morning till night. I'm a wake and bake kind of person, but that just helps slow my hyperkinetic brain down so I can focus on just one or two things at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But I walk around in a perpetual state of bliss, and a large part of it has to do with just I get to doing what I do every day, but getting to meet the people that I meet and have these incredible conversations. What did I do right?
Well, that's everything. Yeah, I think the fact that you have those connections, the fact that you can keep on making them and you keep on expanding. To me, everything about life is expansive until you're not here, and
I
then you get
agree.
to the next zone, and you're still expanding. So,
Yeah, I've gotten any postcards back from there, but that doesn't mean that the undiscovered country isn't something somewhere somehow. Hey, we don't know anything about consciousness. Is a complete mystery to us. We have no idea how you and I are having this conversation.
yeah,
Really and truly, how our brains work. We do not know. Yes, there's an undiscovered country of some kind out there.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
what it
cool to
is,
be passionate about. Well, I just believe that you get there when you get there.
that's a whole other conversation.
You
I have
just
a sneaking suspicion.
enjoy the trip you're on, but there's going to be another one.
Hey, let's do this again sometime.
Oh yeah, I would love to. So this
I would
check
too.
my calendar, and then we can
Yeah,
set it up
yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
So it's cool.
Would love to.
But thank you again for being on the show. We great conversation with Alan Katz, and yeah, he's more than just the Tales from the Crypt. He's doing a lot of cool podcast stuff, and look at what he's doing today. Check out what he's done in the past, but look at what he's doing now with the podcasting. And this is the new frontier. And I totally dig everything we talked about tonight. And I hope everybody else does. I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Pleasure was mine.